would like to thank you for making it this far, because I have spent trillions of years observing both the visible and dark dimensions, searching for something as valuable as this. That search has shown me the birth and death of countless planets, stars, and galaxies. The majority of my findings were lackluster, repetitive cycles of chaos. However, one particular section of time, on this tiny blue rock, when things were unruly for humanity, yet secure enough for it to crawl away from the dangerous freedom of anarchy into the safety of confined organization, pockets of people plundered the planet, collecting and condensing what could be pillaged into powerful paganism. However, as things settled, many outliers began to protest carrying such beliefs. The most dominant of those was a being named Abraham, someone whose faith charted a course for the greatest event in all human history. Within the city-state of Ur in ancient Mesopotamia, now modern-day Iraq, Abraham lived alongside his brothers under the tutelage of their father Terah. The city was home to skilled craftsmen, such as metalworkers, potters, and weavers, who produced high-quality goods. Terah was an idolater who manufactured effigies, helping propagate the importance of commerce of trade. Abraham was involved in agricultural work, growing crops or raising livestock. Abraham's early life was busy and bustling, with a diverse range of economic, social, and cultural activities taking place. Despite there being lots of prosperity, the people of the ancient city were also concerned with issues such as warfare, famine, disease, and natural disasters like floods and earthquakes. But more specifically, the falling of the Tower of Babel was indeed confusing, and the people had concerns about the afterlife, and sought to appease various deities through offerings and sacrifices. When Abraham was 75 years old, Allah spoke to him and told him to leave his homeland and find a new home. Abraham obeyed what was commanded and took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all their possessions, and they began a long journey to Canaan. This distant land was seen as a more abundant region, with access to important trade routes and resources. Abraham saw leaving Ur as a way to establish a new and distinct identity, separate from the religious and cultural practices of his homeland. It should be understood that Abraham could take on such a great journey because of a type of work called pastoralism, where successful breeding and selling flocks of sheep or goats accumulated wealth. This allowed Abraham access to nomadic tendencies, where he could freely move about the land. Although Abraham was blessed with such a lifestyle in Ur, when he arrived in Canaan, he faced several challenges and setbacks that even someone with wealth would find difficult to overcome. Staying faithful to his covenant was paramount, and staying alive was equally as important, so Abraham left Canaan to go to Egypt. While in Egypt, Abraham was afraid that the Egyptians would kill him and take his wife, Sarah, so he instructed her to say that she was his sister. In this time, it was common for a man to claim that his wife was his sister in order to protect her from harm or to secure favor with a powerful person. If a woman was believed to be a man's sister, she would be seen as an eligible marriage prospect, and the man would be more likely to be treated well or given gifts. As a result, Pharaoh took Sarah into his palace to become his wife, and surprisingly, plagues were sent to Pharaoh's house, making him realize that Sarah was actually Abraham's wife. Sparing himself of any wrath, Pharaoh returned Sarah to Abraham, rebuking him for lying. He ordered him to take Sarah and leave Egypt immediately. As a result, Abraham and Sarah were forced to return to Canaan with their possessions, including their servants and livestock. Once they arrived in Canaan, Abraham returned to the same places where he had set up altars before and continued to call on the name of the Lord. Despite all their efforts, they still faced challenges. Yahweh specifically promised Abraham that he and Sarah would have a child together. It had been close to 10 years since they had left their homeland. As time went on, it seemed increasingly unlikely that Sarah would ever bear one. She had tried every remedy and prayer she knew, but nothing had worked. It was a source of great sadness and frustration for her. It was understood that Sarah's advanced maternal age was the sole cause of her infertility. The oldest record of a mother giving birth is the age of 73. Sarah was far older than that, and when she considered the promise made to Abraham, she knew it would be miraculous. It was therefore an extreme test of her faith. And while pondering this situation, Sarah had an idea. She determined that this might be the only way for her to fulfill her deepest desire of becoming a mother. Sarah proposed to Abraham that he take her servant Hagar as a concubine and have a child with her. Abraham was hesitant, but Sarah convinced him that it was the right thing to do, and eventually, He agreed. Thus, Hajar became Abraham's concubine, and she did indeed bear him a son, Ishmael. While this brought Sarah some measure of joy and relief, it also brought complications and pain, as the relationship between Sarah and Hajar became tumultuous. After Hajar gave birth to Ishmael, she began to look down on Sarah and provoke her. Sarah, in turn, mistreated Hajar and made her life difficult. During this difficult period, Abraham was visited by 3 men. Abraham understood that despite their appearance, he was in the presence of the Almighty, and bowed unlike how he would for any other mortal, offering great hospitality to the 3 men. The men warned Abraham that judgment was about to fall upon Sodom and Gomorrah. They also promised that Abraham's wife, Sarah, would have a baby by this time next year. Fearing for the safety of Lot, who was currently residing in Sodom, Abraham sought direct communion with his Lord. He pleaded that the cities be completely spared, even if only 50 righteous people were living there. His Lord agreed, but after searching, Abraham continued to negotiate the number down, eventually failing to find even 10 worthy people. The only people deemed righteous and worthy were Lot and his family. They were warned to flee the city and were given very specific instruction to not look back. The prophecy proceeded, and the cities were subsequently scorched with a terrific fire and terrible brimstone. Unfortunately, the spectacle was too great for Lot's wife to resist, and when she capitulated, was turned into a pillar of salt. This same area during the latter centuries was excavated and revealed that a highly developed urban center was suddenly and completely destroyed around the 17th century BCE. The layers of destruction are more than 3 meters thick and contains a layer of ash, charcoal, and pottery that is indicative of an intense and prolonged conflagration. Additionally, tektites or glassy fragments known to be formed by the intense heat and pressure of a massive explosion have been found in the surrounding area. Exactly 1 year after the cataclysm, Jehovah fulfilled the promise made to Abraham, and Sarah gave birth to a son named Isaac. This was further proof to Abraham that Jehovah will fulfill all promises made, even when appearing impossible. Once Isaac grew into adolescence, Sarah one day watched over him playing with Ishmael. Despite having years behind her former squabbles with Hajar, Sarah could not ignore the malice she felt, and it appeared to her that Ishmael was mocking Isaac. Now that long-awaited promise of Isaac had been fulfilled, Sarah saw no need to keep Hajar and Ishmael around. She eventually insisted that Abraham send them away. Abraham was distressed, stuck between the 2 mothers. He questioned himself. Should he abide by the mother of his firstborn son Ishmael, or by his wife and their child Isaac? Abraham sought guidance from the one being he knew could easily handle the impossible. When Allah appeared to Abraham, he asked him to choose the son whom he loved the most, and offer him as a burnt offering on Mount Moriah. Abraham without hesitation obeyed, and took one of his sons and 2 servants with him on the journey. When they reached the spot, Abraham built an altar, arranged kindling on it, and then bound his son on top of the wood. As he raised his knife to slaughter his beloved son, an angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven and told him not to harm the boy. This was only a test of his faith. Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the bushes by its horns. Relieved, he took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering instead of his son. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham again, saying that because he had been willing to sacrifice his favored son, he and his descendants would be blessed, and that they would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. That moment is considered one of the most important and pivotal events in Abraham's life, as it demonstrated his faith and willingness to obey God, even in the most difficult of circumstances. It has since become understood by some groups of men that the sacrificing was of Ishmael, while others believe it to be Isaac. Understanding that each son became the results of countless generations, who separated into differing belief structures, choosing to make this distinction is deeply immoral. Considering Abraham witnessed the instantaneous flattening of Sodom and Gomorrah to a barren wasteland, followed by the birth of a son to his barren wife, Abraham seemingly had no choice but to devote himself to a being with such devastating power. Yet Abraham, without hesitation, was willing to trust that his Lord would be sincere. Whichever son was put on the altar is of no concern. If you are being shown the moon, you should not focus on the gesture. In the aftermath of the event, Allah reassured him that he would take care of Ishmael, and Hajar sent away. Abraham provided them what he could, but they wandered too long in the desert and eventually ran out of water. Hajar feared for her son's life, so she put him under a bush and sat nearby, waiting for him to die. However, Allah heard Ishmael's cries and sent an angel to Hajar, who told her of the plans for her son and about the promise of a great nation. The angel then showed Hajar a well, and she was able to give Ishmael water to drink and keep him alive. Hajar and Ishmael settled in the desert of Paran, where Ishmael became a skilled archer and eventually married an Egyptian woman. Abraham and Sarah lived in peace together until Sarah passed away. Abraham mourned for her and sought to bury her in a suitable location. He negotiated with the Hittites for a field in which to bury her, and eventually secured a burial site. Given Abraham's nomadic lifestyle, this was the only land that he came to own. After a period of mourning, Abraham turned his attention to finding a suitable wife for Isaac. Abraham instructed his servant to go back to his homeland to find a wife. The servant made an oath to Abraham, and he set out on his journey with 10 camels and gifts for the potential bride. When the servant reached the city of Nar, he stopped at a well and prayed for a sign to identify the woman who would be a suitable wife for Isaac. Rebekah, the daughter of Abraham's nephew Bethuel, came to the well and drew water. The servant identified her as the one he was seeking, and she agreed to marry Isaac. The servant gave Rebekah jewelry and gifts, and he and his party were invited to stay with her family. After receiving permission from Rebekah's family, she departed with the servant to become Isaac's wife. Once Isaac was happily married, he sought to find a wife for his father. He was swift in finding a companion for his father, someone who he knew very well, and Abraham was surprised to see that woman was the mother of his first child, Hajar. Now that Sarah had passed on, their relationship was now different, and so she took on the name Keturah. Keturah went on to birth 6 more children, by Abraham helping establish a great nation before he passed away at the age of 175. Abraham was a monumental figure whose faith was strong enough to inspire multiple religions, revered by Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike as the father of their faiths. Despite their differences, all 3 Abrahamic religions share a deep respect and reverence for Abraham, and despite the chaos that is overwhelmingly seeking to consume this planet, Abraham's faith has been a through line of inspiration throughout history. Even considering the divisiveness that followed his life story, Abraham highlights the possibility of union between these religions. Commonalities like belief in the one true God, a respect for the prophets and holy scriptures, and a commitment to living a life of faith and righteousness. I have yet to see a civilization escape the cold embrace of chaos, not even my own. But this period has been the closest, in trillions of years, to a fully realized united civilization. If this is something you believe in, I would love to hear your comments below, as well as any insights or experiences you have had related to the story of Abraham. I encourage you to share your views in a respectful and constructive manner, and to engage extrospectively with others in the comments section. Remember, the power to build a world able to look beyond differences and focus on the values and principles that unite us is within each of us. So let's work together to promote mutual understanding, respect, and compassion, and to create a better future for ourselves and for generations to come.